a UDP powered webhook. So again, if you wanna, you might be like, hey, we need to improve the documentation a little bit. But my hope is I'd love to see a UDP thing, because talk about your performance boost. Yeah. And if you don't care what happens to the result.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or you know what else would be awesome is if you flag. I mean, well, I guess with the hook system, it's probably easy to set up. Actually, I know it is. Where you're using HTTP while you're debugging, and then when you're ready, when it looks like it's working and it's tested, you switch it to UDP. Awesome! Wow, I didn't think of that, but yeah. Cool. Yes, sir.
It sounded like near the end you were kind of saying that you're basically going to ditch your functional approach to it, or you're just refactoring it.
What I was saying is that the sender callable function, I'm not happy with how it's playing out, because instead of, because you know how we want to extend code, we don't want to like overwrite it.
Right.
And the problem is every time you create a new sender callable function, you have to basically write a new sender callable function. And maybe that's the approach that has to be taken. Maybe there's no easy answer. But I'm trying to find a better one. And I mean, if you take a look and if you have an idea, I mean, I thought of breaking up the sender callable, like have one big sender callable and inside of it are a whole bunch of required little function calls. But if you do that with functions,
you're
it's kind of
simulating a class.
Yeah, you're simulating a class. So I don't know what the answer is. So I'm open. I'm all ears for solutions here.
Can you go back to that code so I just kind of stare at it?
Yeah. Let's see. Here we go. So this is the most simplest version. This is the simple one. And you can see, oh yeah, by the way, I'm passing in attempts, right? There's actually a loop that goes on. Another takeaway I got is there's no reason why I should program this in an asynchronous method, in an asynchronous manner. The reason is if I provide a threaded support for this, or something that works with Redis queue, or Celery, that's not going to suit your needs. That's what I found out really quickly. I'm actually going to be pulling that code out and let different projects handle that as they need it. But anyway, so this is the most simplest implementation, and then this is the ORM version, the ORM callable. And there's several more of these little snippets of code that I could wrap up in a function. Here's where I'm getting the senderable object, or I'm instantiating the senderable object. This is where I'm grabbing the webhook target, which is a record that records the URL and stuff. What happens? I haven't even tested this part yet. I'm sorry. Yeah, there's a yellow bar right here in my coverage. And then these are like just 4 more things, and all the data needs to be there, or I think it does, because it's I'd love to get another set of eyes on this.
What is DK or dequarks?
Okay, so that's a very good question. Okay, this is the function that's wrapped. Okay, this is the decorator's quarks.
Ah, got it.
And these are the quarks. That's woohoo! It's kind of fun. That was moving. So that's what dequarks are. I need to document that better. It's in a code comment somewhere. So now I'm going to go and erase the document so you guys don't make fun of me. Yes, sir.
So going back to your sort of like starting example where you're talking about GitHub is sending these out. I'm as a developer, I'm going through and I'm saying, okay, for this project, I want it to go out to your repo. Is there any kind of thoughts around having sort of more of a pub sub type of model where these things are being broadcast at multiple subscribers? So instead of it being a push and a dedicated presupposed push, this is where I'm going to push it. It's more that I'm going to be sending this type out, and people can subscribe to that type. So there might be multiple sites that want to receive GitHub push notifications, right? There's multiple things that are tracking that same kind of thing. As a developer, I don't want to go to every one of those things and say, okay, add this one, add this one, add this one.
I think I tried to keep the scope of this really narrow and just to like sending out stuff. However, like for example, our stuff, we work with Django REST framework, and we're using this. And I don't see why at some point we couldn't, extend it or knit things together to be more of, fit that, the pub sub system. I honestly have never worked with pub sub, so I can't really talk to it. And I'd love your insights on it. Or I'd love to hear more about it. Because, yeah, you're right. It would be nice if it was just one unified system.
Yeah, for a service-oriented place like GitHub, any of those kind of places where I'm gonna send this news out, and if you want to write a service that's going to get that, all they'd have to do is, PyZMQ, if they publish out that way, they'd publish out, here's where, so you actually just write a little snippet that would say, okay, I'm going to hook that, and anybody who wanted to could then get all of those updates at a one-shot deal.
Considering how many third-party services there are for, GitHub, if you look up GitHub services, I bet there's already something out there. I don't know what. There's a whole bunch of lists, and it's hard to actually look up the descriptions of them. I think there's like 300 different services now for GitHub. We're just one of 300. So, but if we can figure out if there's a good canonical list that's easy to introspect instead of, okay, I click on this item, I pull up the description, now I go back out and I click on it. There's no good index of them, but I bet someone's done it. In fact, I think they're called Zapier, but I might be wrong. Yeah, if you find out, please let me know, because that's, if I could integrate that into this, even if I don't need it for this project, I have another project I'm pretty certain is coming up that will need something like that. So, any other question?
What's the URL again for the slides?
The slides, there you go, it's bit.ly/webhook-slides. So any more questions? Okay. All right, I think that's it. It's Trey's turn.
What kind of API? WCF?
Well, it's a system standard.
So it's a web service?
No, it's an API for analog digital.
Okay, so you're talking about using the COM API?
No, it's Python. It's loaded in .NET somewhere, which has the API. And but your API returns a double array for the sample.
Okay, so who works in a language besides Python pretty frequently? Okay, excellent. For anyone that's coming from a language besides Python, maybe new to learning Python especially, or if you switch between languages, sometimes it's hard to keep track of what syntactic features of Python are unique to Python. So my talk is going to be on 3 little tricks that you may, some of which you may not have heard of, or you may forget. I forget these all the time. I'm using IPython Notebook for my talk, which I'm trying to bring up here because it seems like that's kind of the recent trend with talks, so I figured I'd give it a try.
So you're a hipster?
Yeah.
That was my idea. This is Windows 7. This was my idea.
Is that really Windows 7?
Yeah.
It does. So it looks like a hipster.
The whole thing where you drag the window over, it's kind of on the screen. Love that feature. It's great.
Do you know how to do full screen?
On a browser?
No, get rid of the top bar. Oh, whoa, went away. the screens real quick. Yeah, I don't know if there's any way to get rid of this top thing here. Oh well. Okay, so the three tricks that I'm going to be teaching you about are chain comparisons, packing and unpacking tuples, and inline if statements. Alright, so first, let's define some variables. Alright, so here is a traditional comparison. If y is less, or if x is less than y and y is less than z, that syntax works in a lot of different languages. Here is something that is possible in Python. If x is less than y, which is less than z. That is not possible in Ruby and Perl, JavaScript, C, and any other language that I'm aware of.
It is valid C. It is just wrong.
Yeah, well, you're right. You're right. In some other languages, this would give you the a comparison of the first statement, x is less than y, which would be 1, which would have to be less than z. So it would give you true, unfortunately, but be careful. Yeah, be careful about that. Don't ever move that to another language. So this allows for less repetition. For example, in this particular case, h, I, j, and k are all equal. Instead of saying if h equals I equals j and j equals k, you can just say if h equals I, which equals j, which equals k. It allows for less temporary variables sometimes. So in this somewhat contrived example, if you're attempting to determine whether or not it is currently in between 11 a.m. and 9 p.m., which it is, you could make a temporary variable now that calls our current time function here, and then compare now to 11 a.m. and then compare it to 9 a.m. Or you can compare it all at once with your current time call here. Who's to say this is more or less readable, but just know that it's possible.
Trey?
Yep.
Would that internally make two calls to current time?
No, so this would only call current time once.
Okay.
That's important to note. But it would, of course, do the comparison to 11 a.m. and then to 9 a.m. separately. So any questions about chain comparisons?
How does that affect any short circuiting?
How does it affect short circuiting?
Does it affect it at all,
Oh,
or
does
is
it?
it just like is it least surprise? It does what you expect. Like, you know, if the first comparison fails, the second argument is never evaluated.
That is a good question.
Should be operator precedence and short circuit as normal, I would think.
Yeah,
I would think so, but
I mean, we
this
can.
is somewhat magical. I did like
Yeah,
It'd be
we
bug
can,
file if it didn't. So
yeah.
If you write your own classes that support these operators, you have to be a little careful. I wrote something for building Mongo queries that allows this, and it took a little bit of extra work. So basic classes is pretty, in basic types it works completely unsurprising, but if you write your own types to support it, you have to be careful.
Really, does it not just call the LT and GT magic methods?
No, it has a, you also need to be able to support the R, it's like an RLT.
Oh, right and left, right.
Yeah, to go on both sides.
That's a very good point. So those are both a little bit more advanced questions, but that's definitely something good to keep in mind if you're doing anything custom. Another good reason to know about this, because even if you aren't attempting to support this use case in your own code, if you're writing a library that needs to support other people's code, you probably want to be writing those.
Yep.
All right, so on to packing and unpacking tuples. So a little review of tuples. Tuples are kind of like lists in Python, except that they're immutable. They're often used differently, but for the purpose of this, you can think of them as basically the same, except for the fact that they're immutable. So here's an example tuple. It contains 1, 2, and 4. You can create a tuple with parentheses around it, or you can create it without parentheses around it, unless they're syntactically disallowed unless you actually need parentheses around your tuple. In this case, you don't. You can also create empty tuples by just 2 parentheses next to each other. And you can create single element tuples. You have to stick a comma at the end, otherwise you end up getting just the element that you stuck into it. In this case, it's an integer, just 1. There's a comma, it's a tuple. So, unpacking sequences. This is not specific to tuples. This works for any sequences. So, tuples, lists, strings, dictionaries, these are all sequences in Python. A sequence is basically anything that you can iterate over. I'm not sure if that definition is exactly valid, but I think it's good enough for this example. So, just to remember, our example tuple here is 1, 2, and 4. So, A, B, C, A, comma, B, comma, C equals example tuple assigns A, B, and C to 1, 2, and 4. So this basically allows you to support multiple assignment. So we can unpack this sequence here, which happens to be a tuple in this case, into multiple variables at once. All right, so a more complex example of this is if we had a list of locations. This is a list of truples, if you will, 3 tuples. And if we are to enumerate over this, so just to demonstrate, the enumerate method, it returns the list that it enumerated over, or the sequence that it enumerated over, with the index of each of the elements in that sequence along with it. So in our case, it returns a tuple containing the index and the tuple for each of our elements in this list. I'm missing, I think I was playing around with this and forgot to restart my IPython server. So, you know what, instead of live coding, I'm going to restart it real quick. Because that will probably be just as fast. As you can tell, I'm very new to IPython. Okay. Let's go back to the word. Alright, so the example I was going to use here is a for loop. So using that enumerate function we just learned about, we can loop over each of the elements and get the index and unpack the tuple at the same time. So what this will do is print out P0, 1, 2, 3, P1, 3, 4, 5, P2, 5, 6, 7. So that's kind of nifty that you can do deep unpacking. So unpacking is also useful for swapping variables. This is the usual example that's probably given in introductory Python courses. So we combined tuple packing and sequence unpacking for multiple assignments, we've already seen. Multiple assignment can also be used to swap variables. So x and y, let's see what we assigned them to previously. They're 1 and 2. This here, if we print out x, print out y. Now x is 2, y is 1. X is 1, y is 2. So we're just swapping these variables. Now, traditionally, in any other programming language, you would need a temporary variable in between to swap 2 variables. You could XOR the variables or something like that, but nobody does that except for in C, maybe. Oops. So in Python, we don't actually need that temporary variable. We can just swap them right away. Any questions about tuples or sequence unpacking?
Yep. One thing that comes up a lot in NumPy, and I'm not sure if there's a best way of doing it, is that you can get functions that return you tuples of values,
right?
Which returns you as many values as dimensions your